Welcome back to Algebra. Here we're going to get a little more practice with dividing these negative and positive numbers. So here we're given that a is equal to negative 3, b is equal to negative 1, c is equal to 2, and d is equal to 6. That's what we're given. And then we're going to simplify the following expressions. What if we have b plus 5 times c divided by 3 minus d? Now all you have to do is plug in the values, and then you have to use all the rules that we have learned to solve it. So b here is going to be negative 1. So you have negative 1 plus 5 times c. c is 2, so it'll be written just like this. And then on the bottom we have 3 minus d, which is 6. Be written just like that. Now, remember order of operations. You can think of this fraction as there being an implied parentheses around this term and implied parentheses around this. So you have to do the top separately from the bottom first. Now inside the top, you have addition, but you have multiplication. Multiplication always comes first, so you have to leave that addition for last. Negative 1 plus 5 times 2 is 10. On the bottom, the only thing there is subtraction. So 3 minus 6, you subtract them. 6 minus 3 is 3, but the larger absolute value is the negative sign, so it's going to be negative 3 on the bottom. Now we add the tops. We're adding mixed signs, so we do subtraction. 10 minus 1 is 9. The larger absolute value is the 10, so it becomes positive 9, and then on the bottom we'll have negative 3. Now we finally use the concept we've learned in the section, which is dividing. 9 divided by negative 3. We're dividing different signs, so the answer is going to be negative. 9 divided by 3 is going to give you 3. And that's the final answer. Now what if you have a times b times c divided by 1 minus c times d? So again, let's plug in everything that we know. A is going to be negative 3, so we'll put that there. B is going to be negative 1. C is going to be 2. And on the bottom you have 1 minus c, which is 2, times d, which is 6. So we're going to write it like this. Now again, on the top of this fraction, we have to simplify the top completely, and then the bottom completely, and then the division comes last because there's like an invisible parentheses kind of like surrounding each of these guys. Now on the top, you have a bunch of multiplication, so you go step by step left to right. So you have negative 3 times negative 1. Negative times negative gives you positive. 3 times 1 is 3. You still have to multiply by 2 later. Now on the bottom you have to do inside parentheses first. 1 minus 2 is going to give you negative 1. And then you have the multiplied by the 6 there. Okay? On the top, 3 times 2 is 6. On the bottom, don't forget, negative 1 times positive 6 will give you negative 6. And now you have 6 divided by negative 6. Positive divided by negative gives you negative. 6 divided by 6 is 1. So the answer is negative 1. That's the final answer for that guy. You just have to do the order of operations and make sure you're covering everything completely. A minus 2 times d over b plus 3 times c. A is negative 3 minus 2. D is 6, so I'll just multiply by 6. On the bottom, b is negative 1 plus 3 times c. c is 2. Now again, you have invisible parentheses around this and around this, so we have to simplify the top completely. We have subtraction, but we also have multiplication. The multiplication always comes first. So negative 3, then we have minus 2 times 6 is 12. All right? And then on the bottom, you'll have negative 1 plus 3 times 2 is 6, positive 6. All right, so now you have some work to do on the top. You have a negative minus a number. Or you can think of it as a negative plus another negative 12. So what you do is you add the absolute values, giving you 15, and it's going to be negative because when you're have a negative subtracting a number, you go more deeply negative. Or if you're thinking of it in terms of addition, it's adding two negatives together, so you're basically going to add them together and your answer is going to be negative 15. And then on the bottom, negative 1 plus 6, how do you handle that when they're mixed signs? 6 minus 1 is 5. It'll take the sign of the larger absolute value, which is this guy right there. And so then finally you have negative 15 divided by 5. You're dividing a negative divided by positive, so the answer will be negative. You divide those guys, you get 3. The answer is negative 3. And our last problem for this section is kind of cool looking. You have c plus a, c minus a, over b plus d. All right, now on the top here, c is going to give you 2 plus a, which is going to give you a negative 3. I'll just write it like this. And then c is going to be 2 minus a, so I'll write it like this, minus a negative 3. On the bottom is going to be b, which is negative 1, plus d, which is 6. Now we have some weird things going on here, so let's take a look at it. When you have 2 plus a negative 3, how do you handle that? 2 plus a negative 3. Let's write it down. You can write it however you like it, but basically it becomes 2 minus 3 on the top. And then you have two negatives right next to each other here. So when you have two negatives, they become addition. 2 plus 3. We talked about that a long time ago. On the bottom, you have the negative 1 plus 6. Now you can go ahead and do that. The negative 1 plus 6, you go ahead and subtract them, you get 5 is going to be the answer. It's going to be positive because the larger absolute value is positive. All right, so to continue down here, for the first set of parentheses, 2 minus 3. 2 minus 3. What do? You go ahead and subtract them. 3 minus 2 is 1. And the sign is going to come from the larger absolute value. So you actually get negative 1 here. 2 plus 3 is very easy. That's 5. And on the bottom, you have the 5. Okay? And on the top, negative 1 times 5 is going to give you negative 5 because negative times positive negative. And then you have 5 on the bottom. And so finally, what is negative 5 divided by 5? That's going to be negative 1. Because negative divided by, because they're different signs, you get a negative answer. So that's the final answer for all of these things. Just flexing your muscles a little bit. In some cases you're having to add these things together, negative and positive. Sometimes you're having to multiply them. And then finally you get a division at the very end that we have to apply what we've learned today. So now you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide numbers. If any of that is confusing to you, or if you don't feel like you're comfortable with it, then you have to master that. So watch all of these sections again until you really feel like you get it, until you can do your own problems and get the right answers the majority of the time, like probably 90% of the time. You really don't want to miss too many of them, because in the next step, in the next section, we'll start talking about solving equations. Well, guess what? Every time we solve an equation, we're going to be adding and subtracting things. So if you don't know how to add negative numbers or subtract negative numbers or whatever, or multiply them, then you're not going to be able to solve the equation. So you have to make sure your skills are set. So make sure you can do these yourself. Solve every one of these problems by yourself. And then, when you're confident, follow me on to the next section. We'll start to learn how to solve equations, simple equations at first, moving into more complicated equations in algebra.